Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of A Handful of Hope. I'm so happy and grateful to have Susan Hannifin-MacNab with us here today, who's a social worker, educator, and author who holds a master's in social work, a bachelor's in education, and credentials as a teacher and school social worker. After the sudden death of her young husband, Susan founded A2Z Healing Toolbox, a heart-based business that assists the bereaved in integrating authentic, practical, action-based tools into their lives while healing with intention. She facilitates conference workshops, professional development trainings, psychoeducational healing retreats, and keynote presentations. Internationally, Susan's 5-time award-winning book, A2Z Healing Toolbox, a practical guide for navigating grief and trauma with intention, is used by mental health practitioners and bereaved communities worldwide. She also serves as the Programs and Education Manager for Soaring Spirits International, a nonprofit organization that provides programming, support, and hope to the global widowed community and their surviving children. Susan, welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Jesse. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
I am too, and going through your bio there's a word in there that you use that is one of my favorite words to use in correlation with this topic, and it's with intention. I found, Susan, that when I first started to go into this whole space through navigating my own grief and my own losses, one of the most challenging and difficult pieces of that for me were well-intentioned people would give me the sage old advice of grief has no timeline. You may be grieving the rest of your life. And to me, it was almost like them telling me there's no hope and that you could feel like this forever. And for me, I felt so horrible and broken. It was really one of those things that put me at this place where it's like, well, I don't want to live like this the rest of my life. So what in the hell is the point of living? And it was that intentionality piece that I kind of stumbled upon throughout this whole journey that was so transformative to it. So I was hoping maybe we could start there with just what is the intention? What does the intention mean for you?
Well, I would love to answer that, but I do want to just touch on something you said about the advice giving from people who may say, well, this is just it, right? This is how it is forever. I actually had some opposite, something on the opposite end of the spectrum, which was an exact formula. Like if I follow this exact formula, I will be better in no time. And believe it or not, the formula was, it's for every year you're with this person. Okay, so I was with my late husband for 17 years. It's 1 month of grief time. So in 17 months, I should be cured.
Yes.
So when I got to that 17 months, I thought, okay, I am nowhere near the end of this, right? And in our culture, we are maybe given, right, 2 weeks off of work, maybe, and then 365 days later, we should be all done and no longer grieving, and our healing is over, right?
Yeah.
So we both know that does not happen in either direction. But as far as the intentionality, to me, that means really being conscious and aware and doing things purposefully to move through the grief, to move around it and all over it, and actually become friends with it, which is not something I ever wanted to do. But getting comfortable. Oh, there you are again. Hi. It's kind of like the little creature on the shoulder that you may not want to have there, but hi, there you are again. Okay, now I'm feeling sad. Now I'm feeling angry. Now I'm completely heartbroken. Now I'm just feeling broken in general. Oh, it's the grief. It's the little guy on the shoulder. And once I got comfortable with the little guy on the shoulder, then I could move with the grief into other areas of healing and knowing that actually it wasn't such a horrendous monster here. This little guy was an amazing teacher.
Yes.
I'm sure you found out as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, Susan, where I've often spoke on the topic of treating our emotions like messengers. to not take them as, we run into trouble because we turn feelings into facts. And most of our feelings are based off of perceptual blindness, right? We're
Yes.
seeing only one small piece of the available, the unlimited availability of realities that we could look at. And then we take that perception, we have some sort of a reaction to it, we feel the emotion, and we turn that into our gospel. And if we can change that and look at it as a messenger, there's something to teach us, there's something to learn. So logically, I had that understanding, but when I was in knee deep or chest deep in the throes of grief, and the experience, and I know you can attest this better, as you can attest this firsthand, it is so unlike any other that it's almost like the logical application went out the door. And I found myself saying, yeah, but this is different. Yeah, that applies there, but not so much here. And it really was, once I was able to start to sit with that, as you were saying, and make friends with it, that and embrace it warmly, as is not trying to run away from it, not trying to hide it, not trying to push it away, but really embrace it. I discovered some of my most important and valued life lessons.
Yes, as well for me. And I really, there's one, as you're talking, I'm thinking, yes, this phrase keeps coming to mind, which is lean into the discomfort. And that has been said by Brene Brown. That has been said by Pema Chodron, who is the wonderful Buddhist monk. By leaning into the discomfort, only then can we see what truly is happening and how we truly feel and how we can move forward with all of our life pieces intentionally and with purpose. So I, like you, had to really lean into the discomfort of it all, to sit there with the little grief monster and go, okay, this is what it is. It's not what I read in that book in graduate school. That doesn't make sense logically anymore. This is what I'm dealing with. And part of actually one whole chapter in the book that I wrote is letter D, doing your homework. And doing your homework is just that, diving into communities, experiences, websites, other people who can actually shed some light on what is this grief thing. And if we all are going to live, we all are going to die, and so are our people. And so how do we do this? It's inevitable, right? We can run from it, or we can lean into the unknowingness and the discomfort and learn. And there's so much learning. There's actually a whole body of research called post-traumatic growth that comes out of the uncomfortableness, the horrific experience that some of us have had. But post-traumatic growth is the flip side of the coin of post-traumatic stress. And I can go into that if you'd like. There are 5 major pillars of post-traumatic growth. And when I read this research, I thought, there's my hope. There's my hope that someday I'm not just going to survive 1 second, 1 minute at a time. I'm actually going to be able to thrive. I don't know how, I don't know when, I don't know what the pieces are of that journey, but there's research on this. That made me feel good. Like I had something to grab onto for hope.
Gosh, Susan, there's so much there I want to unpack, and you just set up about 4 different paths we can go down, and I want to explore all of them. So I'm going to try to do it in some sort of order that makes sense to me. So what I've found with folks, especially the ones who struggle or suffer for an indefinite amount of time, is at some very base level, there's been a decision that has been made to almost perpetuate the existence and suffering, not consciously. It's not saying somebody's throwing their hands up and saying, I want to feel this way forever. But it was almost like that decision where there was a line in the cement of, here's how life was, and life will never be close to that again. And what I'm hearing from you is it sounded like you made a decision that there is hope, that there is a possibility to thrive based off of the research that you had uncovered, and realized, wow, if others could do it, so can I. Is that fair to say?
Yes. So uncovering the research helped, as did surrounding myself with other people who were walking this, for me, a widowed journey, but they were 2 steps ahead, or 4 steps
Mm,
ahead, or 10 steps ahead. One of my wonderful friends started out as a peer mentor. Her name is Robin, and she was 4 years ahead of me in her journey of raising 2 kids at home. Her husband had died of pancreatic cancer. And she was the first person to say to me, I will walk with you. I cannot fix it. I will walk next to you. Your life will still be good. It will be different, but it will still be amazing. And I thought, what? I have a dead husband, a traumatized self, a 5-year-old wondering where his father went. How could this be good or even amazing or even better? I mean, that made no sense to me until and unless I started walking with the intention of, I'm going to figure this out. If she has done it, and that person has done it, and this person, and that one, and there's research saying
mm.
there could be growth out of this, then I'm going to figure it out. And I don't know how or when or where or what the steps will be, but I'm definitely going to do it.
Did you feel like, I'm curious because I hear a lot of people, and I would describe it as this too. I would describe myself as being broken. At first, it was broken was an identity. And then through subsequent losses, broken evolved from an identity to a feeling. And then as I started to, learn more and more through experience and research and stuff about removing that, it evolved even more. But I'm curious for you, when your friend Robin said that to you, at the time, were you feeling like that you were broken and needed to be fixed? And or did her changing that she can't fix it, did that change anything for you?
I don't know if it happened exactly when she said that to me, but you said the word broken or feeling broken, and it immediately took me back to me in my walk-in closet. My walk-in closet was the place where I went to scream, yell, throw things, be hysterical, shut the door. It's pretty insulated, and I just had to let all that emotion out. And I remember my parents were over trying to help me with my son one day. They were out somewhere else in the house, and I was in my closet having a moment. And I just remember repeating, I'm broken, I'm broken, I'm
Mm,
broken. And my mom, came through and heard me say that. And of course, she didn't know what to do. So in comes the therapy dog, which I have. She's like, here, have the dog. So I did feel at that moment that I had nothing. I was completely broken, but really what it was I was broken open. I was
mm.
cracked like an egg, just everything spilled out. And I was not in the place yet of putting that together or even looking at the egg yolk and the egg white and all the shells. It was just too much. So this is me 8, almost 9 years later versus back in that walk-in closet, you know, having a moment and just repeating, I'm broken, I'm broken. So the reframe was, you're broken open. And of course you are. And Tom Zuba, who wrote the foreword to my book, who has 3 members of his immediate family who have died, his wife, a young daughter, and a young son, he was the first one to say that to me. And it really hit home, which is why I love interacting with other people who get it and who have walked some sort of journey. Because for him to say to me, as I will say to everyone listening, of course you're broken. You are broken open. Your
Yes.
heart is broken. You're like, you should be feeling broken. Your life just blew up or fell apart or collapsed, whatever you want to say. However, those pieces can be picked up and built, put into a new mosaic. It won't look the same way, but mosaics are beautiful if you can look at all the pieces.
I love that. Susan, I came across a study recently, and I'm not sure how old the study is, but the study was done with groups of widowed women. And they were curious to see the effect on community and sharing their stories, being basically serving as some sort of mentor support structure. Sounds like how Robin was to you through their experience, how it impact the emotional well-being of the women who participated. And there was two groups, and there was one group who proactively shared their story to others who were newly widowed, and there was another group who didn't. And what the study found was after, gosh, I want to say that the time frame was 6 to 8 months, something like that. The percentage of depressive symptoms or feelings was dramatically diminished to even in some cases completely non-existent in the group who was doing some sort of mentorship, had some sort of community companionship, contrast with the other group who wasn't. And their symptoms had worsened to the point that it was moving almost to clinical depression. So the only thing different was that community piece. And I know from talking with you before how invaluable community was for your own healing and some of the work you do. Could you speak to that a little bit about the importance of community and going through the healing process?
Yes, this is one of my favorite topics, and I could talk all day about community, but I'll try to put it in a little 5-minute.
This is that ish thing I told you about.
I know, right? So yes, Robin was my first unofficial peer mentor, and she said to me, listen, I would like to take you to this conference called the Camp Widow. And I said, absolutely not. Am I going to a conference called Camp Widow? So I didn't. And then I eventually did. And a year after Brent died, I found myself in a hotel conference room with 300 other widowed people of all ages, all sexual orientations, all genders, some children, some had no children. And it was the greatest place I never wanted to be. And that was the biggest push for me to keep going and keep talking and keep communicating with others who have had similar experiences of loss. I eventually started presenting workshops at Camp Widow, which is run by Soaring Spirits International. That group of 25 people said to me, listen, I love all this information you're giving me about the tools that have helped you and your son. You need to put this into a book. And I again said, absolutely not. And then that happened because the community said, listen, this is important. Listen, we need this. And I will say that over the past 7 years, I have been to 15 Camp Widow conferences. I now work for the organization, and our mission is to connect peers to a like-minded community. It's all about community connection. It's all about sharing the story. It's all about feeling like you're not alone. We run virtual offerings. We run virtual groups where widowed people are talking to other widowed people about what helped them in their journey. We run 3-day conferences internationally with 300 to 400 people walking in, sitting with everyone else who has a similar story. And the power of community, the power of connection is invaluable, as you saw in the research. People realize I am not alone. Maybe my person died suddenly, maybe their person died from cancer, maybe their person died from suicide. It doesn't matter the cause. It's just that we are all walking this journey together. And there's so much power in holding hands and walking together. whether it's, finding people who have also lost a parent or a sibling or a spouse or a child. But what I found is initially I was gravitating toward the widowed community. But now I have many friends who are bereaved parents,
Mm,
and the lines cross. Grief is grief, loss is loss. And now we've hooked on to an even greater community. It's like not just bereaved parents, not just bereaved siblings, not just bereaved spouses. We're all doing this work together. So now my community is even broader than just the widowed community. It's really life, right? We're all walking this life journey together. And I learn from you as you learn from me, as we learn from that person over there. And I haven't read that particular study, but we actually have a resiliency center at Soaring Spirits International based at Schreiner University in Texas. And there's a ton of research coming out about the widowed community specifically and the importance of community and peer connection.
mm. Gosh, if you have any research that you'd be open to sharing, I'd love to check it out. And I think I shared this with you before. So I do some mentorship with widowers. There's a group who I got connected with through my TED Talk, who it's approximately, I think maybe 1,800 men who have lost their partners, same as you were saying, various ways. Some were cancer, some were sudden, some were suicide, some were old age, whatever it was. And with men, I'm trying to think of how to put this delicately.
They're not as apt to reach out for the community.
Thank you. That was far more delicately
There
than I
you
was going to
go.
say. I was just going to say men really suck sometimes about it. But what's really fascinating with that is you can see this almost the torment within them, because on one hand, they're not apt to reach out to the community. They're not well versed or trained in how to express their emotions, nor do I think most of society is. I think that one of the biggest blunders of society is as you were saying earlier, the expectation is suck it up, put the Band-Aid on, and get back to work within a week. And
Yes.
I think for men, especially an older generation, that is even doubled down on more so. But then what also starts to happen is some of them will start to use that pain and torment in forming a new identity for them. And it becomes this way almost that they start to, it's like how they hold on to what was. As long as I feel pain, it's a qualifier for how much I love. And it's a qualifier in the sense of, I think a lot of them, there's guilt that's coming up with it. Was I the best husband? Was I there as much? Did I say I love you as much? Did I didn't take her on the dates that she wanted to go on. I didn't buy her flowers as often. And it's almost like they're putting this penance on themselves. I'm going to make myself feel more pain so that I know that, first of all, the pain that I'm feeling is justified, but two, it's the way that I can still kind of demonstrate the love I have for my now departed partner. And then with that psychology, it magnifies the resistance to opening up and sharing their story, unless it becomes a process of commiserating. Rather than walking, it becomes reinforcing. And I guess that's a long way of asking, when we start to get into communities, when we start to reach out for people, how can people navigate that space of the separation between forming a community that's going to walk and support versus stumbling into community where it might be more commiserating and reinforcing?
That's such a great question. So I want to touch on the male aspect of grieving, and specifically widowers, because I work with these guys. And then also the types of communities that there are. So I'll start with the communities that there are. When we walk into an ice cream shop, Baskin and Robbins maybe, we see 31 flavors to choose from. Now, there are so many people talking about grief and loss and healing. It's a good thing, but you might not jive with all 31 of those groups, like all 31 of those flavors. So what I say is, just like finding a therapist, sometimes there's trial and error involved. There are many Facebook groups for bereaved parents, for widowed people, for men, for young and dating. I mean, whatever the Facebook group is, or a nonprofit. You have to kind of get in there. You don't have to jump in with 2 feet. Stick a toe in, see what it's like. If you like it, stick your foot in. If you still like it, put maybe half your body there, but you don't have to jump in with 2 feet until you really feel comfortable. There are many, right? There are 31 flavors of ice cream. There are many different groups, and one group may fit better for you than another. Back to therapists, I went therapist shopping, and many of us should do that. We need to find someone to work with that we communicate well with, that makes us feel comfortable, that may take our insurance, right? We have to do a little research. And I think that's the same with community. Not every community is going to fit for every person. So I just want to put that out there, because there are choices with ice cream and with grief groups or communities. And it does require a little bit of taste testing at first. And then as far as men and grief, I have been very fortunate to know, many of my friends are male, and they are widowed or they're bereaved parents, and they are the anomalies or the minority who have stepped up and stepped over those lines to create communities where they are. And then if one man does it and he's not considered a wuss, right? Then another man will come, and then another and another. It's almost like it takes one person to first be vulnerable, and then someone else sees that and they go, okay, well then if he's doing it, then this is okay, and I'm going to do that. And then on and on and on. For instance, I have a wonderful friend in San Diego. His name's Casey Gaunt. His son died when his son was in his 20s. And Casey, over the years, has developed, he calls it his tribe. And it's a fraternity of men who have lost children. And he's got hundreds of people on his email list. He has groups in non-COVID times that meet in different parts of the city. And it's a bunch of men, and their children have died, and they have been broken open. And Casey was the one to say, this is, something's got to change. I can't keep this all in. And now that other men have seen him do this, they are following and they're joining the group. And he has a huge group of men that are able to communicate and are able to share. So I think it takes some strong, like not strong physically, but strong emotionally and psychologically, those men to step forward, like you, to say, hey guys, this is normal, right? Feelings are normal. Let's not jam it in. Let's get it out. And we're all in this together.
Yeah, I agree. That was 100%. Susan, what is your, I often talk with folks about the legacy of their loved ones they've lost. What is the legacy? What is your husband's legacy for you?
Well, oh my gosh, many legacies, I think. Well, first of all, I have a son who's walking around who is half of my husband, really, in the way he talks and acts and thinks. It's pretty funny. Also, Brent was an artist. This is a painting that he did here behind me when we lived in Hawaii. and a musician. Those were his hobbies. And then he was a professor by trade. So we have many of his items. But the biggest item, in addition to my son, is I really believe that he helped write this book. Like, we co-wrote the book together. And Brent was the professor, he was the writer. I was a teacher and a social worker who had no intention of writing. So when I talk about everything in the book, you know, I'm talking about Brent and me and our life together. And that has created this book that is now helping thousands of people. And the work I do as a social worker for a nonprofit, Soaring Spirits International, all of that is a legacy, you know, mine and Brent's, and they're locked together. So I feel like daily he is either, I'm looking at items that are his legacy, right? And his surfboard is down the stairs there, or I'm communicating with his son who's in the house daily, or I'm working with people who feel like they know Brent, even though they never met him, because they know me and they know the work I'm doing, and his stories are in the book as well. So again, I feel like we are all doing this together, whether we're still here physically or whether physically we've shed our bodies and gone to the next place. We really are, you know, in legacy, in community.
Susan, we're coming up on that time. I told you this was going to go so fast, and I feel like I barely even scratched the surface of half the questions I want to talk to you about. But before I ask my final question, where can people find and connect with you?
They can find me via my website, which is A2Z Healing Toolbox.com. They can connect with me there. I also have an A2Z Healing Toolbox Facebook page. And then if they would like a copy of the book, that can be found on my website or on Amazon, at Barnes and Noble, anywhere where you will find books.
Very good. I feel like one of the very universal parts of this past year, the time of the recording is, this is mid to late May 2021 right now. As we're starting to come out of the last year with COVID, I feel like one of the experiences that will emerge from this is there's going to be many instances of grief, whether it's the actual physical loss of a loved one to death, or it's grief over a sense of security and safety and freedom people once had. Maybe it's grief over a loss of job or a loss of identity of who they were pre-COVID and who they're trying to figure out they are as they reemerge into the world. So for folks who are navigating through grief right now, who are going through some grief, I would love if we could leave them with one or two tangible steps that you might recommend them to take as they sign off from here today. And I understand that's a very large question to ask because the space that each individual might be in is so different. But maybe there's one or two kind of universals that could be applicable to folks that they could walk away and they could apply for themselves, or they could share with a loved one who's going through it right now.
I really like that question. And as you say, you know, we are in a time of a global pandemic. No one has been untouched. The silver lining to that is that we are in a global community and there are resources more now than ever before, and they are virtual. For instance, I run a group on a virtual platform called Circles. It's circlesup.com. And it is a virtual mental health platform full of small groups for any kind of loss, your job, your child, a miscarriage. It's a wonderful resource that people can access from anywhere in the world. They can hook up with a licensed therapist and a small number of group members from the comfort of their home. So I would say the first takeaway is do your homework, right? Reach out and find your people, whether it's virtually or whether it's in person now. Some places are opening up, but you are definitely not alone. We are all in this together, and there are people everywhere who can and will assist. professionally and personally. I always say to people, ask for help, which is really hard because we are not used to asking for help in the Western world. But again, back to community, we were not created to do this life alone. So I would say to reach out for help. And then when it comes, accept it. That's often hard too. So if someone says to me, hey, do you need help? I know you're still a solo parent. Can I drive Jacob to football practice on Tuesday? I say, yes, thank you so much. And how about next Wednesday also? Does that work for you? People want to help, and we need to ask for it and then accept it when it comes.
Gosh, that's such an important note to end on. I find it seems like the accepting is often harder than the ask, isn't it?
Yes.
Everyone, my goodness, is this one you're going to want to dive deep into. Susan shared so generously today on a wide breadth of topics that circled around loss, grief, and healing from that loss, and looking at recognizing that the grief monster that's following you around, that's lingering on your shoulder, may not necessarily be a monster or an enemy, but it can be warmly embraced as a friend. And when you begin to embrace it as such, that's where the healing can start, can begin. Looking at the importance of communities, my goodness, was that thematic in this. And it's interesting that I hear people say this all the time. As connected as we are, often we feel so disconnected from other people. And leaning into the opportunity that those communities provide, either digitally or offline, and finding people and surrounding people who get it, who understand, and most importantly, who are going to walk with you, who are going to walk next to you. We're not going to try to fix you, but support you and be there for you along the journey. Susan talked about the importance of shopping those communities too, just the same as you might shop a therapist and explore the options out there. It's not necessarily a one size fit all. The most important thing for you is to figure out where you're going to be comfortable with, and where's the communication, the support you need, and where's that going to show up for you. We look at the opportunities of healing and looking at where does hope start to come from. Some of the decisions we made. Is it possible for me to heal? And healing with intention, being intentional about the healing journey versus allowing yourself to be the feather in the wind. I often use that beautiful scene in Forrest Gump where it starts with the feather blowing in and the feather blowing out. And we think it's such a beautiful scene. And I think with healing, especially, we need to aspire to be the wind and not the feather. Because in the scene, ultimately, the feather is at the mercy of the wind. It's going to blow where the wind takes it. Versus the wind has the intention. It has the ability to move the feather where it wants. Be the wind on your healing journey. And to close off with the idea and the importance of asking for and then accepting help. My goodness, almost every day I hear people talk about how they wish they had this, they wish they had that, only to come to find out that they never have directly asked. Somebody was telling me the other day that a question unasked is the same as a no, right? Because you've already made the decision that the possibility is not there. And then to take the next step and then to ask, but be willing to accept what's on the other end of that ask. I know for me personally, I have struggled so many times throughout my life asking, but even more so accepting help, because I make it about ego or it makes me less than, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I found, as I know you have too, Susan, on these healing journeys that we inevitably all will have to travel on at some point in our life, it really is the help that we accept that often makes the healing much more possible and the journey far less painful, in the sense that it's painful already. It's made more painful when we walk it alone. And it's always nice to have a companion to travel a road like that with. Susan, what a treat this was to spend this time with you. Thank you so very much for sharing, and thank you so very much for the incredible work you're doing in the world. It has been such a privilege to speak with you today.
Oh, thanks, Jesse. It was my pleasure.
Absolutely. We will see you next time, everyone, on another edition of A Handful of Hope. Bye-bye.